Every so often, there's a game that comes along that for whatever reason resonates with you deep inside your core. You know what I'm talking about, right? These games aren't always the best, and in some cases they're deeply flawed products that are, objectively speaking, should not sit with you. They might be filled with bugs and technical issues that hold the game back, or be too esoteric to reach the audience that it strives for. But despite all that, whether it's because the game does something unique that speaks to you, or whether it comes along at the exact right moment you need it to, you find yourself being completely swept up in what the game has to offer, leaving an indelible mark on your gaming soul, often in a completely unexpected but no less important way. Somehow, Atomfall has become one of those games for me, and I found myself completely absorbed by it over the last week, coming back again and again despite the myriad technical issues playing havoc with my playtime. Atomfall likely isn't what you think it is, but neither is that necessarily a bad thing. It isn't a British Fallout, but a tough, unforgiving first-person action-adventure game deliberately lacking in many of the trappings you might expect from a modern video game. Weapons have no visible stats, you don't level up in a traditional sense, and if you want to complete a mission, you have to be ready and prepared, in fact, and willing even to go out and figure it out for yourself, because the game won't hold your hand at all. Because of all this, for me at least, Atomfall has become one of the most absorbing and immersive games that I've played in years. It won't be for everyone, that's okay. But I suspect that in years to come, this game will have developed a niche but rabid fan base who will yell about it into the night if ever they hear mention of it. And I suspect I'm going to become one of those. Atomfall is obscure, challenging, unforgiving, and very often oblique in its delivery. But instead of turning me away, that left me only hungry to discover its secrets. Firstly, and appropriately, it's important to say that Atomfall isn't anywhere near perfect. In fact, in the state it was during the early stages of release, I'd even go so far to say it was broken and borderline unplayable. The game, at the time of recording, of course, is absolutely riddled with bugs. During almost each play session, I encountered audio bugs that would force me to restart the game, as well as loading errors that would see me loaded into geometry and unable to move, all the way up to hard crashes that lost me hours of playtime. There was even a moment where I conceded defeat only for Rebellion to release a patch that very day that would seemingly alleviate many of the chronic issues I was encountering. If I hadn't become so enamoured by the game, I would have given up long ago. And it's hard to decide if the very fact that I had given up on a game I was so obsessed with speaks to the quality, because I endured the issues long beyond what one would deem acceptable, or if it's an indictment on the problems because I was very nearly forced to give up on a game that I was absolutely obsessed with. Fortunately for you, chances are that these bugs will have been ironed out by the time you get to play in Atomfall, but that makes it no less acceptable. As a gaming community, we are becoming all too accepting of games that are released and charged for without being in full working order, and I'm keen to rage against that particular gaming machine trend as long as I can. Based on the trailers in the run-up to release, the world and atmosphere is probably what will immediately jump to mind when players think of Atomfall, and rightly so, to be honest. It's oozing with charm and character, and everyone that has spent any real time in Britain, particularly in the north of England, will recognise many of the trappings. From the layout of the small villages to the farmyards, regional accents and even buildings, it's got the look and feel of a rural northern England town area, so to speak, that I can't quite recall having seen in any other games. During the early stages of the game, players will find themselves in a village town hall, and upon entering and walking up to the stage area, I was immediately transported back in time to the village my gran lived in when I was a kid, running around a hall just like it on a Sunday morning after she had been to church. It's perfect, literally perfect in its recreation, and I spent a good 15 minutes just walking around the hall taking it in. As a body of work, the world created by Rebellion might err on the side of having a little bit of a clean feel for a post-apocalyptic world, but in every other regard, it nails the tone and atmosphere. Even the factions, although slightly comic booky, admittedly so in feel, they do a great job in creating an often confused, oppressive, or slightly insane tone that the development team seem to have been shooting for. This is set after the events of the Windscale disaster in 1957. Atomfall takes place in the 1960s following a decision by the UK government to wall off and quarantine the surrounding area of the nuclear power plant. You, the player, take on the role of an unnamed survivor waking up in the bunker known as the Interchange without memories or any clues as to what or how you got there, or even why. You then set forth to discover the mysteries in the world around you, interacting with various characters across the world, all with their own often secret motives at play, with each of them promising an escape from the quarantine zone in their own way, but with each of them seeming as untrustworthy as the last. It's up to you, the player, to figure out what's going on at the nuclear power plant, as well as in the lives of those around you, and make various decisions that will have major consequences to the events that unfold around you. I've alluded to this already, but it's the mission structure more than anything else that is likely to have the player thinking about the experience long after they have finished playing. Instead of a standard follow this waypoint here, speak to this person before following this waypoint to collect this item, the game is much more vague in its delivery, asking for players to follow threads and leads to unlock the mysteries of the world around you. For example, you might happen across a pub in the local village and speak to the landlord behind the bar, who might mention that someone at the dam might be able to help you with a problem that you have. But instead of placing the marker on your map, the player is then left to discover the location of the dam for themselves and then follow the leads divulged by the NPCs to find the person. So the landlord is giving you the big area to go, so then you find out where the dam is, you head to the dam, and then when you reach the dam, there will be clues around the place that will help guide you towards the person that you're looking for, or, as is sometimes the case, you might just completely stumble across them right away, in which case you would find them and then move on. If they're alive, that is. It might sound vague, and it often is, but what for me at least this did was it encouraged me to engage with the game in an all-consuming fashion. I had to read notes that I found littered around the world, consider my responses, conversations, and think about how I wanted to approach different situations. Very often in games such as this, we find ourselves running around very much aware of the game's systems going on under the hood. And whether we like to admit it or not, for many of us, this will dictate the decisions that we make in these worlds. I.e., we're trying to manipulate what is going on in the background rather than actually engage with the conversations in their own right. Instead, the vague nature of Atomfall forces the player to engage and respond to situations on their own merit. You'll find yourself reacting to NPCs based on what they say and do rather than the outcome you might be aiming for at the end of the game. I've also found that in recent years, since COVID particularly, that I've got to put a lot of effort into my attention span. All too often, I find myself watching TV and realising that I've been flicking through my phone and not paying attention, or playing a game with Twitch on in the background, not giving either the game nor Twitch my full focus. Atomfall forced me to pay attention and fully engage. If I didn't, I would have become lost and not been able to follow what was happening at all. This left me with a feeling of freshness, excitement, and intrigue that has long been missing from my gaming life. The next things players will be forced to engage with is the combat mechanics, and at least from my perspective, I found this too to be another source of freshness. All too often these days we could become used to, and even to an extent expect, colour coding and stat trees that break down relative power of each weapon the player might choose to wield. In Atomfall, however, it follows a similar fashion to the mission structure in that there's no colour coding, no rarity markers, and no endless lists of stats that will delineate the damage breakdown of a weapon. Instead, players are left to figure it out for themselves and often come up with a set of weapons through trial and error that they find works best for their own playstyle, essentially. There is actually a bare bones upgrade path within the game and the weapons. It's completely unnecessary to the progression of the game, however. I know that a friend that was playing this game and they unlocked the ability to upgrade weapons fairly quickly, but it wasn't until the final 10% or so of the game that I discovered this feature, and then could have easily finished the game without engaging with this mechanics at all. Combat is also often a distinctive choice that the player will make. In Atomfall, it's too easy to become overwhelmed by just a few enemies, meaning that at any time you're drawn into combat, it's a tense and frantic affair that will lead to players often choosing to avoid the big robot marching around the room rather than running in all guns blazing to bring it down. This makes for an intense atmosphere that will more often than not strike fear into the player when they know they've got no other option than to go through an opponent standing in their way. The game's also a decidedly short experience, which is a decision that ultimately feels appropriate, I think. The game can be dense at times, and at least for me, until it got into the swing of things with what the game wanted and expected of me, it often felt slow to develop and reveal itself. If Rebellion had decided to make this a longer experience, I'm not sure the game would have benefited from that at all. This is a short-ish, sharp, in and out experience, which in a world that I feel many games long outstay their welcome, this was also something that I very much appreciated. Now, before I say this, I want to be clear that there's absolutely a place for a regular mission structure of a game that guides you from moment to moment. In fact, I'm playing one of those games just now and enjoying it perfectly fine. But if you've ever wondered about how a game could bring back the wonder and reward inspired by self-discovery, much in the way that I imagine Miyamoto wanted when he created Zelda all those years ago, then I put it to you that this game has that in spades. This isn't an all-timer, but it's a game that spoke to me on a level that I was completely unprepared for, and one that I hope continues to trickle its way into the hands of players looking for something different. As I've said, this game won't be for everyone, but for those that it is for, this is a special, special game.